But he quotes, the Alter Rebbe would repeat it every 3 years, each time almost verbatim. His grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, said, each time there was a new light. The words were the same, but there was a new light. To which the Rebbe Rashab commented, is always the same, but Ma'ar, luminary, is always like something new. Sometimes a person could be like a tape recorder and say exactly the same thing over and over, and there really is no change. There are other people who say over the same words, but there is a change. Why? Because the one that's saying the words has changed. So to say it in a somewhat humorous form, there was one rabbi who had a favorite sermon. Every year he would say the same sermon with the same words. So one time someone said, Rabbi, why do you keep saying the same words? To which his response was, why do you keep doing the same sin? It must be that each time you do this, there's a different feeling involved, though it's the same sin. So too the words. To put it a little bit differently, as we change, even the ideas which are exactly what we've always felt, or the words that we've always said, change with us as well. So when it says that the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, would say this particular maimah every 3 years, almost word for word, his grandson pointed out there was a different light, and his great grandson said the reason why there was a different light was because there was a different source of light. The Alter Rebbe himself had changed. Okay, we are in the middle of chapter 4, page 186 of Iggeret Hateshuvah. We're beginning with where we ended off yesterday, with Alter Rebbe writes that in order to understand properly what Teshuvah is all about, we should examine the word. The word Shuvah means Tashuv, hey, that the letter hey has to be returned, has to be restored back to its pristine state. In the name of Havaya, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey, there are 2 Heys. So Tshuva means to return the letter Hey, being that there is the first letter Hey. The second letter Hey, this is hinting to us that there are 2 levels of Tshuva. There's a lower level of Tshuva and a higher level of Tshuva. And of course, the Alter Rebbe will explain to us what are these differences of Tshuva. We also have to understand that there is a statement in the Zohar which says that there's a certain particular sin where Tshuva does not help, and the sin that's mentioned is wasting of seed, to which the Alter Rebbe says this doesn't seem to be correct. How could the Zohar make a statement like that when Tshuva helps for everything? Even if a person worshipped an idol, or God forbid, committed an immoral act with a married woman, he would still be forgiven if he did the proper Tshuva. So how could the Zohar say that for this sin there is no Tshuva? And the answer is, when it said that Tshuva is not accepted, it's referring to the lower level of Tshuva, but the higher level of Tshuva, certainly it does help. I was preparing for today's class, so I want to point out that the Rebbe explains that when we say that it's necessary to have a higher level of Tshuva to take away the sin of wasting of seed, he explains actually every sin creates, again, a separation and a barrier. So any sincere tshuva takes away that barrier. And therefore, there's no difference between the most severe sin or the lightest sin, because the effect of sin means that that you are not receptive to God's presence, and as if to say, God is not receptive to what you have to do because you sinned. When you do teshuvah, you take away that interference. That is true for all sins, including the one that we just said, that there is no teshuvah. However, when we talk about fixing, rectifying, purifying the person, for that, there are different levels of tshuva. On a very practical level, and we'll talk about this much more in the future. If there's a person, okay, who, okay, I'll take an example. There's a person who hurt you, so you tell your receptionist, I don't want to take any, I don't want to take his calls. So the person calls, and the receptionist says, sorry, the boss doesn't want to talk to you. Period. We have a problem. There's no communication. So what this guy does is he sends a messenger asking the boss to give him another chance. So next time he calls, the boss picks up, what do you want? Now he's pretty gruff with him, but he did pick up. And the guy says, I want another chance. And the boss says, okay, and hangs up. So essentially, that is, if we were to use that as a very silly example of us and heaven, any teshuvah that we do, which is sincere, means that the boss is taking our phone calls and allowing us to continue our job. But there's no, you're not going to be invited, obviously, to the boss's private parties. However, if you excel in your work, or you excel and he realizes your sincerity, then maybe you could get back, in English, the expression is, in his good graces. So too, the Rebbe writes, tshuva helps for everything. No matter what kind of a sin, even the sin that the Zohar says it doesn't help, it does help. What the Zohar means to say that it helps, but it doesn't undo or fix or purify. However, with a higher level of tshuva, that can be done as well. Okay, so now we're going into the text. It's halfway down the page. In order to understand this a little bit about the two levels of tshuva, a lower level of tshuva called in Hebrew tshuva tata, a higher level of tshuva called tshuva ilah. In order to understand this, tzarich lahagdem, we first have to preface masha mavur mehakosa b'divrei Razal. We have to first preface what's explained in the verses from the words of our sages, where they talk about inyan hakara sumisu b'dei shamayim. They talk about that if a person does certain sins, there is karas, there's excision, cutting off of the soul, and there's umisa b'dei shamayim. There's also the idea of premature death. Kisha'eva avera shechayav malav karas. And what does that mean? What does it mean, excision of the soul? So if you had done that type of a sin, hayameis mamish kaidam chamishim shana, you would actually die before 50. Oh, that's if we talk about chorus, excision of the soul. Of a misa b'nei shemayim, if there's a sin where the punishment is death from heaven, then meis mamish kedem shishim shana, you would die literally before reaching 60. As the Gemara says it in regards to Hananiah ben Azar, Hanavi b'Yirmiyahu. In the days of Yirmiyahu, English, Jeremiah, and he lived in the time when the first temple was in its decline, and Yirmiyahu was prophesizing that if the Jewish people do not change their actions, the temple will actually be destroyed and the expulsion of the Jewish people will take place. Hananiah ben Azar, he was a false prophet, and he said, that's ridiculous. He's a prophet of doom, Yirmiyahu, and he interpreted that, no, there'll be a war, we will be victorious, etc. To which Yirmiyahu said to Hananiah ben Azar, you are a false prophet. You are prophesying in the name of God what he did not tell you to do, what he did not tell you to say. The punishment of relating a false prophecy is death from heaven, to die before 60 years, and And indeed, Hananiah ben Azar, who was this false prophet, died before 60. So, in parentheses, ula pa'amim, sometimes gam b'misa b'dei shemayim, even when we talk about death from heaven, which we just now said cuts off the life at 60. Sometimes sometimes there's an immediate punishment. For example, like we know in the biblical account of Er and Onan, who married Tamar, where because they did the sin of wasting of seed, they died immediately. But these statements are discussed in literature, to which the Alter Rebbe asks a very obvious question. And his question is, Hare nimtzu b'chol dar, we find in every generation, kama v'kama chayev krises and mises, many people who have done the sins where the Torah mentions that their soul will be cut off, which should at first glance mean that they would not live past 50. Or they do sins where there are misais, where there should be death from heaven before 60, and yet harichu yameim ushneim b'neimim, they had long life, and it was a pleasant life. If it wasn't a pleasant life, we might think that the suffering that they have during their life is fulfilling what it says, that they're dying a little bit each day, so to speak. But we find these people who have done the sins in which the Torah says that there's excision of the soul or death from heaven, and yet they lived longer than 60, and they lived a very pleasant life. So how do we make sense of that? So we'll have to explain that again, that there are different levels of the way the soul gives life to a person. And as he will explain, there's a certain level where the person who's living on earth is in a form not living at all. But we'll get there. Acha Inyan, 4 lines from the bottom. The idea Yuvan will be understood. Alpi Masha Kosav. There's a verse in the Torah that says, Ki chelek Hashem amei v'chuli, that the portion of God is his people. Chelik M'Shem Havaya Baruch Hu. What does that mean? That a part of God, as if to say, is his people. That means that there's a part of the name of God, which we say Yud Kei Vav Kei, and there's a part of that inside of him. Kidduch Siv, as it says, Vayipach Ba'ap of Nishmas Chayim, that Hashem blew into his nostril a breath of life, and as we are taught from the Zohar, Uman de Nafach, someone that blows is Mitoche Nafach v'chuli. The air that's being expelled is coming from deep within him. So too, when it says that not Hashem said, let man live, but Hashem blew into man life, that seems to indicate that Hashem took part of himself from deep within and implanted it inside of man. Even though clearly with the language implies something physical, obviously Hashem has no physical. Of course, God has no image. So what does that mean? Breath, and what does it mean from deep within? But we're using that. I think in English the word is simile. We're using that image of a person huffing and puffing, blowing deeply, to convey the thought that the air which is deep within him is being expelled. Literally, you get tired, you get fatigued from blowing strongly. So in other words, there seems to be a part of your energy from within that's being expelled through a strong breath outside. This is to give us a better understanding that when Hashem gave life to man, when he created man, it wasn't something in italics, something superficial or extraneous. No, Hashem actually put something of himself inside of a person. So though we have to always acknowledge that the language that we use is not to be taken literally, because God has no body nor breath. Last three words on the page, Ach Dibra Torah, Adam. However, the Torah does talk in the language of man. And what the Torah is conveying, just like there is a hefresh, there's a separation, a great separation in a person below. In other words, in our existence. Al derech mashal, for example, bein hahevel sheyetze mipiv b'diburei lahevel hayetze dei neficha. What the Torah wants to convey to us is the superiority of man, that everything else of creation came into existence because God said so. He said, let there be light. He said, let the land bring forth vegetation. So he said that. But when he created man, he blew into him life. So just like by us on earth, we all see a difference, whether you speak or you blow. That third line from the top, what goes forth through speech, melubash by, inside of that is melubash, is enclosed, kayach v'chayes ma'at mizer. There is part of your life, but very little. And all of us know that if you do a lot of talking, you do get tired, even though it would seem I'm not really expending that much energy. I'm not running, the heart is not pumping very quickly, etc. Not a lot of calories are being burnt, but clearly we do get tired. Why? Because a little bit of the life is expressed there. However, you can't compare 6 hours of speaking to 6 hours of blowing. No one could blow air for 6 hours. Even 6 minutes would probably be completely exhausting. Why? Because when you blow the air, it's coming from deep within. So there's more of you, as if to say, that's being transferred. Whereas when you speak, there is you, your energy, your being, which is being transferred from in to out, but very little. What comes out with speech, is enclosed just a little bit of the life force. It's actually considered external. If we were to look at the life force, the energy that's within us, and then we were to say how much of it, or in what manner is the life force from within us being expressed, we would say just the external part. But what goes forth with the intensity of blowing, when you're blowing from deep within. So now in that breath, malubish by kayach v'chayas pnimi. Now in that breath is enclosed a power and a life force which is inner, from actually your soul of life. So because we see that within man, so kacha mamash al derech mashal, so too literally, but in a parable form. Hamavdol havdalas ein kates, separations of separations without number. In other words, we're taking this idea of man that applies to man, and we're expanding it to try to help us understand God. So we have to make havdalas in case we have to make separations without end. But the idea is conveyed that yesh hefresh otzum ma'od. There's a tremendous separation lamaila, above, ben kol tzva hashamayim, between all of the heavenly hosts, va'afilu hamalachim, even angels, shenivru me'ayin liyesh, which are created from a non-material, and they now exist, v'chayim v'kayomim, and they are alive and they are existing. They are coming, their life force is mebechinas chitzonius achayis. It's from an external form of life. V'hashefa, an influence, shemashbein say baruch hu, which Hashem is bestowing or influencing, lahachayesa elamis, to keep alive the world. Ubechinazu, this level of life, nikras b'shem ruach piv, it's called the spirit of his mouth. Aderech mashal. Ukameshikosav, and as it says, uveruach piv kol savam, that with the spirit or with the wind of his mouth, he keeps alive all of the hosts. V'bechinas chayes hamalubeshes ba'esiyesh shabasarim amanis. This is the life force which is enclosed in the letters of the 10 maimores, the 10 utterances, and the parentheses, shehem bechinas kelim v'amshachas chuli, which the 10 utterances are vessels and things that enable the influence to be drawn down. So we'll end with this thought, that people make a fundamental mistake by thinking what we call heaven is actually superior to earth. And a more profound mistake is they think that an angel is of a holier nature than a human, than a Jewish man, a Jewish woman. And it's a very big mistake. What is the error? The error is we could see the outside, we don't see the inside. Let me make, again, a very mundane example. Lahavdil, to make a separation. If you looked at a car, and one car has no dents, and it's shiny and freshly painted, and you look inside, the leather, there's leather seats, it's fantastic. And then you look at a second car, which has dents and this and that, and you say, okay, I want the first car. Any person, especially if it's secondhand, will tell you, excuse me, did you open up the hood? Did you look at the engine? There's an inner part to the car. If you're just looking at the outside, car number one looks so much nicer, it looks superior to the second one. But open up the engine. This one has 4, this one has 6 cylinders. This one, clearly, it looks like it's clogged. This one is functioning efficiently. But people often just look at the outside. For that matter, though we should never compare a human to a car, there are certain people that look very, very impressive, whether it be physically or the clothes that they wear, whatever, but we don't know of their character. There's an inside. So sadly, our impressions based on the exterior of a person is often erroneous, and occasionally comes back to haunt us. How did I make such a mistake? And the answer was she looked very good. It's even true in a profession. You might look at a job offer, and your interview is in a fancy building, and there's glossy this and glossy that, and impressive numbers. And when you're in the profession, you see that it's decaying. There's no morale. It's being run inefficiently, though the outside looks really good. In contrast to a less impressive building, a less impressive interviewer, a less impressive numbers, but actually it's very healthy. So this idea of outer and inner is a issue that we deal with daily in this world. Of course, we cannot see this, but we can understand it from our reading of the Chumash. God created creation through the 10 sayings. Let there be this. Let there be heaven. Let there be earth. And anything that God creates is most impressive. Most impressive. One of the things that God created was man. If you compared man to the strength of a bull, he has very little strength. He's not impressive. If you looked at the height of a man and you compared him to a redwood tree, very unimpressive. If you looked at his capacity to run or to make a dam with his hands, the beaver out is much more impressive. What do we say? No. You don't look at man that way. Look at him, he has a mind. The mind is inner. But when you just look at the outside, man is nothing. Literally, in many ways inferior to other things. In fact, the Midrash and the Talmud has one of their many incisive comments is amazing. When a horse gives birth, its foal is a horse. It doesn't have to learn how to be a horse. Most animals, their offspring within hours is functional. And a human being takes years before it becomes functional. It needs to be taken care of literally 24/7. It cannot eat by itself. It cannot change itself. So is that impressive? But of course, man is very impressive. He controls his environment in a limited way, but a very powerful way. He's the Lord over the animals. He's the one that's pulverizing mountains to make roads. It's not the other way around. Because there's an inside which is of a character and of a nature which is so superior you can't compare a rock to a person. Okay, this is really a lot of extra words. When we think about the godly force, which is animating everything of creation and of the worlds that exist beyond us. So we could get a glimpse of that concept by looking at stars, looking upwards. We know it's the equivalent of infinite. And we look at all of that beauty, majesty, magnitude, and we say, we're not even a speck. And we are taught in Hasidus, you have it all wrong. Absolutely, you have it wrong. You are more godly. You have more force, more godliness, more life force of the Creator than anything else, including the greatest angel. Because all of creation was made with speech. And when you speak, how much of your energy is expressed? How much of your being is expressed? The answer is only a minute amount. But we were created with a soul that God, it wasn't enough for God to say, let man be a living creature. No, God had to, as if to say, to put himself. He had to be involved in this. Incidentally, when you're blowing, it's very hard to concentrate on anything else. When you're talking, you're driving, you might be shaving with one hand, you're doing everything at the same time. It's possible to talk and to do other activities, very hard, if not impossible, to be blowing fiercely and to be doing something else as well. So using the way it is in the human reality, we begin to appreciate more our significance, our importance. We have a neshama, which is a part of God. From the inner part, though we cannot really use words like inner and outer, for God has no body, yet in the language of man, we understand what we're trying to say. So everything that God makes is important. Nothing is as important as man. In fact, we'll end with the statement that, though the Rebbe doesn't say it, but it's said in our literature, and that is, not only is everything inferior in spirituality to the potential of man, but everything was created for you. Each and every one of us, whether you're a tzaddik or not, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're very observant or non-observant, the world was created for that individual. All of the stars, all of the grains of sand, all of the universe was created for one person who has God's presence invested in him. And this is we'll continue, God willing, on Sunday, but this is the power of tshuva, to take this awesome energy and to celebrate it and return it in a manner in which it's able to be revealed and in a manner in which it can be felt. Okay, we'll end with this beautiful thought. Let me wish you all a wonderful holiday. I see Mr. Riskin from all the way from Crown Heights. Have a great Shabbos. If you're in 770, any other times, have us in mind, whatever. Okay, shalom, everyone. Those of you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Bye.